You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship with David C. Baker and Blair Enns.
David, today's topic was suggested by one of our listeners. Drury Bynum on LinkedIn suggested that we should do an episode on transitioning from generalist to specialist. So after you reposition your firm, what kind of aches and pains and torture do you have to go through? I think he wants some encouragement to stay on course. How do we help Drew? Do you want to begin at the point where you're considering moving from generalist to specialist and then kind of travel through the entire arc of the journey from there?
It does seem to take a long time. It's not like this is a new idea to people. It's more about, do I really want to do it? And then if I do, what's the right choice? And it just seems like people chew on this idea. I like the word masticate. They masticate on this idea for 18 months. And, as I was thinking about putting some thoughts down around this topic, I kind of had a little bit too much fun with it. So you're going to have to slap me around and keep me on track here today. But you masticate for 18 months before you do anything.
All right. So the idea, you go to a seminar or you listen to a podcast or read some consultant's brilliant blog post about why you should specialize. You get this idea in your head. You even get a sense of maybe where you should go, but you almost never pull the trigger immediately, do you? So the idea sits with you for a while. And then what starts to happen, or what patterns do you see that cause you to actually take action on this new idea?
Yeah, it's sort of like that phrase you hear people throw around that, nobody starts exercising until they've had a heart attack, that kind of thing. And what are the heart attacks that make you pay more attention to what you've contemplated doing? And I guess it's different for everybody, but one of the ones that I see coming up a lot, maybe it's more just recently, I don't know, but I keep hearing people talk about how tired they get of writing long proposals for a new industry or a new service offering or a new demographic, and they just feel like they're not getting traction fast enough. They're having to reinvent the wheel too often, or they're just tired of not winning enough proposals. And of course, this is something that you've spent most of your life helping people think through, but that's the one that comes up a lot. Or, oh goodness, we just won this. Now we need to learn about this new industry. And they just long to get to a point where they get a head start each time and they're not having to start over. That seems to be what prompts them. That's the heart attack that gets them exercising. There's just this sense that they're wasting so much time getting a fresh start over and over again.
Yeah, tired of reinventing the wheel when it comes to a proposal. I've probably heard that dozens of times in the last couple of decades. And then the principal thing's, okay, it might be time to take some steps on this positioning thing. So the first thing they do is they start to kind of hint to their staff and possibly clients, but it's really more about an internal hinting of this, isn't it?
Yeah, right. They've been thinking about the industry up until this point and their clients and their prospects, and they realize, I've got to do this as a team. They look behind them and say, is anybody going to go with me on this charge? How are people going to feel about this? And then you start throwing the idea out to see who kind of nods their head and says, I kind of feel the same thing you are. We should probably talk about this some more. Or even if you don't say anything differently, you listen a little bit differently. You listen to what people are enjoying. Now, here's the big mistake. If you take it too far, you'll gather everybody in the conference room and you'll say, all right, everybody pull out a slip of paper. If you could wave a magic wand, what would be the ideal kind of client work you'd like to work on? And then you just throw open the floodgates and everybody contributes their deepest desires, which have no grounding in what the business needs or their expertise. Is usually about what to explore. But yeah, that seems to be an early step. What's my team going to think about this? It seems that notion, that question comes up more for firms that are newer in their journey. Later on, it's just kind of a matter of fact. People just accept that this is what great firms do, but they look around and say, who's going to charge with me if we decide to take this mountain?
And the reality is when you do reposition your firm, you have to accept that you are going to have a significant amount of staff turnover.
Yeah.
Often it's over 50%, not necessarily immediately. Some people won't go with you. And then you'll find that once you are specialized, you focus and you build this deep expertise, you'll find that some people can't keep up. So that is something that you do have to think about right away. But I think the point we're talking about here is that you're floating the idea and running it past staff. And I think you and I both agree that's not necessarily a good idea. I hear the pushback a lot. I'm afraid of specializing because I'm afraid, my staff won't like it. What do I do about that? And I almost never answer. I need to be fair to people in the situation that they find themselves in. But I have this visceral reaction. I think, well, there are other places they could go work. Leadership is saying, we're going in this direction, follow me, and having people get excited about following you. So when somebody expresses to me that they're concerned that their people won't go with them, I think, well, you have a bigger problem here. It's not your positioning.
Right.
It's your ability to lead your own firm. And that's a little bit harsh, but I don't know another way to think about it.
I don't either. Although I take hope in the fact that principals usually worry about this too much. It doesn't become as big an issue as they think. Somehow they manufacture this in their minds, and nobody makes immediate decisions. So it's something that you can plan for and build around. And it is worth paying attention to, and it's definitely a mistake to democratize a decision, but it's just as bad a mistake to make the decision on your own and not bring your staff along with you. They deserve the respect of playing with ideas and poking them, just like it took you 18 months to finally come to the decision. You would expect them to require some time to get used to a particular idea. So it happens, but it's not often as critical as we think. Okay, so then you've decided, all right, we've got the staff thing. I'm no longer worried about that, or I might lose 3 people out of 15, but I can live with that.
Now it's clients, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Now it's clients. Like, oh, shoot, I'm pitching somebody right now that has nothing to do with the new focus I'm contemplating. What's going to happen? And what do you hear when that comes up?
More often, it's my guerrilla client is not in this new area of focus, whether it's a discipline or a market. And so there's a concern about what will our clients, and in particular, our biggest client, think. And I think you and I have walked enough people through this decision that we ask, well, how much time do your current clients spend on your website?
Right.
And they say, well, I don't know. I'll go ask. And they go ask, and they come back and say, oh, our biggest client says he's never been to our website.
Right. He only went when I asked him that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's important to understand that positioning is, and this is a line I stole from you years ago, positioning isn't about the work that you do, it's about the work that you'll pursue. It's about the path that you're charting forward. So if you change the focus on your website and your biggest client called and said, hey, it looks to me like you're in an entirely different business, you would just say, well, the website reflects the direction we want to grow in. It does not reflect our intent to quit serving you or quit growing in the areas that you would need us to grow in. So just calm your client down a little bit. And I think generally speaking, your thought of the reaction that you will elicit from your current clients, it's an overstated concern.
Yeah, I've worked with hundreds of clients. You've worked with hundreds of clients. I have never once seen a situation like this go bad because a current client was nervous about the new direction. And in some cases, the firm that's making this change never tells them, and I have never heard it come up. And in some cases, they do tell them, and I've never heard that conversation go bad. So I suppose there's always the first time, but it seems like we don't need to worry too much about that. And this goes back to something that we've talked about quite a bit here, and it's one of the mistakes that we make in positioning. You get to a certain point in this process and you have, let's say, a huge blank sheet of paper on the conference table, and listed are all of the clients that you've done really good work for, you enjoyed the relationships in most cases, and you made some good money. And at that juncture, you're trying to draw a circle that includes as many of those people as possible. And this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And you can't draw the circle bigger just because you're afraid of what somebody will think, because it usually doesn't become an issue. You've got to draw the circle tighter. Specifically, what am I talking about here? For A usual firm with the typical makeup of clients, the circle they would draw around clients that they've done work for in the last, say, 3 or 4 years, the circle they're drawing includes about a third to a half of those. So they're excluding somewhere between 2/3 and a half of the work they've done in the last few years from the new focus. And on the surface, that sounds like a terrifying thing to do, but in real life, it is not that terrifying. The ramifications are not that severe.
Okay, let's speed this part up a little bit.
Okay.
Because I want to get to the transition point after you've kind of gone public with it. We still have a big list of points you want to hit here. So while you're still kind of contemplating or in the early stages of the transition, next on this list is it occurs to you that your case studies might not be relevant, right?
Yeah. And that's because usually you think they need to cover current work, and they don't. Case studies can reflect the work you've done 3-4 years ago, and the client doesn't even have to be a current client. So that's not something that I worry about. A bigger issue, which I think we do need to worry about a little bit, is, all right, is it going to be so disruptive when we change our focus to the existing clients that we need to consider a sub-brand? And that's a fork in the road for sure, where you say, all right, there's too much at stake here. I'm going to leave the current firm like it is. I haven't been doing any marketing anyway, and so that work will keep coming in like it normally does without a whole lot of effort on my part. That will allow us to accept some stuff that isn't in our declared focus. But let's create a sub-brand. We'll yank over all the work that fits the new brand, and that's where we'll put all of our focus in terms of looking for work. And if something comes along that we need to accept that doesn't fit, we'll let that go to the old generalist firm. That's a big decision to make. And my perspective is a little bit contrarian there. I know some folks who feel like that's a pretty dangerous thing to do. In my experience, it's not a dangerous thing to do, and it can also create a really amazing fresh signal to the marketplace that something's new happening here, and it invigorates the staff as well. But that's a big decision to make as well. Do I change the whole thing, or do I create a sub-brand?
Yeah, specialized sub-brand or even an arm's length brand that doesn't necessarily appear to be related. So it creates a whole new set of work for you. But I think the understanding or the assumption underlying it is, you probably weren't doing a whole lot of marketing work for the parent Generalist brand anyway. You probably don't have a lot of recognition. You probably don't have a lot of traffic going to the website. So I'm with you. I think it's a great way to test a new positioning that you're unsure of. It's a great way to hedge your bet if you're worried about that sub-brand taking a while to take off.
Right.
And then you decide to build your own website. What happens then?
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing happens.
Nothing for 6 to 18 months.
Yeah. It's the job that keeps coming up in your weekly production meeting, and everybody looks at each other. It's like, we haven't. It's not that you don't know how to do websites. It's you don't know what to say, or it keeps getting pushed to the back burner because there's other more important paying work to do. So you finally come to your senses and decide you need to hire somebody on the outside to do it. Let's not put too much effort into this. We talk about constraints a lot. I wish one constraint is whatever you do cannot take more than 2 weeks from start to finish to get your website up. I don't care if it's 3 pages long, as long as the messaging is precise and it says the right things and excludes other things, that's enough for me. I wish people would just lower their expectations about how complicated their website needs to be.
I'm with you. Put your new positioning on the website instead of under construction, although you don't see much of that anymore.
Yeah.
Just a new landing page, essentially, until you build out the rest of the back end. Put it up there. Ultimately, the way you get your website done, maybe not all of the firms, probably even less than half, but probably the way you should do this is to outsource it. Get somebody else to do it for you. Pay money, get treated like a real client, make the project urgent, and move quickly.
It'll cost you so much less to pay somebody else to do it.
Yeah. And then your site goes live and you probably see what I see, which is you get an email in your inbox about our new positioning and website. And I always think, this isn't worth sending an email for.
No. What you do is you refer to your website when somebody wants to talk to you about working together, or people are looking back up the email chain to see where this is coming from and they learn more about you. It's not something you need to announce. It's like, just start living with it. It's not that big a deal. The world is not getting up every morning wondering which companies changed their website that day. It's a big deal for you, but it shouldn't be treated as a big deal. It should be just a matter of course.
You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship. Your hosts are David C. Baker, author, speaker, and advisor to owners of expert firms, and Blair Enns of Win Without Pitching, the sales training and coaching program for creative entrepreneurs. For more information, go to twobobs.com. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling a friend and rating us on iTunes. Thank you. Now back to David and Blair.
We've just talked through kind of the arc of all of the decision making and the dragging things out and the pain that you go through from thinking maybe it's time to specialize to actually taking action. You get to the point where you finally pay somebody else to do your website. You do the launch. You have a bit of a grand opening for the website. Nobody shows up. Then it's crickets. So this is inevitable, right? There's crickets and you start to second guess everything. And then your world starts to change when the first prospect who fits your new positioning signs up. What happens from there?
Oh, there's this flood of relief because for the first time, now we're going all the way back to 18 months, 24 months when you first started taking this seriously. All of a sudden, all the work seems worth it because the conversation is so different with this prospect. And while you're on the phone, you can point them, you say, hey, are you in front of a browser right now? Go to this, and you point them to something. You're not making up a story that fits what they want to hear. You've already said exactly what they want to hear, and it just feels so different. I get these notes all the time from people right after their first real conversation with the prospect, after their new website is there. And it's the website itself, we keep talking about that as if that's important. It's not. It's really, the website is a symbol of a new direction and a new articulation, a new point of view. And it just masks all the other things that are happening. But there's just something beautiful that happens when the message resonates in a way that you've been dreaming of.
I remember one of my early clients many years ago now. These two guys were in their late 50s. They had been in business for over 25 years. And I got an email from one of them saying, today, for the first time in my career, I feel like the expert. So they had narrowed their focus from a generalist design firm to, I forget what the specialty was, but to a specialist firm. They started putting the message out there. And he just had a conversation with somebody where the dynamics were completely different. I talk about you can occupy the expert practitioner position in the relationship, or you can occupy the vendor position in the relationship. And here was a human being who had 25 years of experience of always operating from the vendor position. And he had just had the first conversation where the client immediately handed over the high ground to him and treated him like the expert and allowed him to navigate or lead the conversation and through the arc of the sale.
And once that marketplace acceptance happens, that just creates this entirely different motivation. Now it's not just theoretical or hypothetical. Now you've seen the difference it makes in your conversations with prospects and even clients to some extent. And now you begin to feel differently about crafting a point of view. Before, you're sitting down thinking, is anybody reading this? Do I really know what I want to write about? How far can I push this? And then people start responding positively to the message, and you just can't wait to sit down and write some more because you're getting some response in the marketplace that validates what you thought was going to be true anyway. That's that moment. I remember when I was sitting down to write the last book, I was originally going to write what I hoped would be a textbook. And so it was going to be 120,000 words. And
good Lord.
Gosh, about, 4 or 5 days into it. I know, that was what I was thinking. About 4 or 5 days into it, I was boring myself. I just couldn't even, it just felt so laborious. And I just stopped. And I remember I put my laptop down and I walked out on the porch at the cabin where you've been. And I just said, all right, this has got to be different. This has got to be a passionate defense of expertise. And that's exactly what we're describing here. when you have the opportunity to know something that your prospective client so desperately wants from you, and they look to you for leadership. And that's what this moment is. You use the word the flip, and this is a different kind of a flip here, but it's the same idea, and it just changes your perspective. And now all of a sudden you want to tell all of your peers about your experience and encourage them to take that step of courage as well.
Yeah, you've tasted expertise, or I've heard you say before, You've tasted competence. It's really about tasting this sense of feeling like your own belief that you are the expert. But it's not all rainbows and unicorns, is it? There's still a lot of trouble. And I think this is what Drury was alluding to, because I think he's past that moment of validation. And I haven't talked to him about this, so I don't know for sure. But 6 months in, so you've had validation, you feel like, oh yeah, this is going great. Some other problems arise. What happens?
Yeah, you're not sure really what you're going to do with this. I think some people too don't stick with the deep implications of it long enough. So I've come across many situations where firms clearly have deep expertise. Their website represents that well. What they're writing and talking about and speaking about and being guests on podcasts, all the places where their thought leadership bubbles up, all that stuff is really good, but it's not impacting their bottom line yet. And that's where, we don't want people to think that this stops with that feeling you get of tasting competence. Ideally, you keep making yourself a little bit uncomfortable by pushing the envelope some more and remaining hungry and taking risks with clearer points of view, and not working longer, but working smarter about paying attention to what will really change your clients' perspectives. And then it bleeds over into so many other areas too. All of a sudden, that employee that you were pretty happy with, you realize that they haven't quite embraced this. They're not contributing to the firm's health. And you start thinking differently about needing some new people. And it really does change everything about your firm. It would be interesting to see what sort of questioning comes up from people about 6 months in. It seems to come up at different points for different people. Sometimes it's way before that flip. Sometimes it's 2 years after that flip when they look around and they say, oh, I feel so much more competent now, but it's not showing up in the money. I get confused about how this experience differs for people, just honestly.
Yeah, and I think in the transition period, and the transition period is probably a couple of years, but in the first 6 months in particular, you're effectively running two different businesses. You're building one while kind of letting go of the other. There's staffing implications. So people who weren't maybe happy initially start to quit, and they cite reasons that aren't the real reasons. Some people just clearly aren't going along in the new direction because maybe their power source has shifted or eroded. But also, you bring the bad habits with you, right? So now you're a specialized expert in this new area, and you've got a couple of clients in this new area, but you're still locked into this pricing prison that is a jail cell of your own making, this mental idea of what people are willing to pay. So when you do shift over to the specialized firm, you're being treated differently. That's an invitation to raise your prices and even start to charge differently, maybe based on value rather than based on inputs. You have to let go of those old ways too. And it's really hard to get out of that, I called it a jail cell. It's really hard to just kind of suddenly shift in your own head the idea that clients will pay more, sometimes a lot more, sometimes multiples of what you've been charging before. So there is this transition period. And then let's talk about, at some point, you have to crack that nut. You have to get to the point where you realize you get validation from the market that you can charge more. So you start to make more money. But you have another realization then, too. You realize it's not just about money.
Right.
What else dawns on you?
It's about doing better work. In fact, by better work, I mean work that's more impactful for your clients. There's all these validation points that come to you from your clients. They don't come to you from your advisors, your consultants, who can say the right things to you. But it's really hard to believe those things unless the marketplace agrees with it. And so the marketplace decides they are more interested in working with you than in the past, and that feels fantastic. And then to follow up on the point you just made, they don't flinch when you decide to charge more than you did before because they're in love with the expertise and they want to honor you with that pricing. But then you start to see, and this of course doesn't come to your realization, doesn't surface until months later, you realize that you are being more insightful with your clients and discovering the truth about what they're going through and pointing to more efficient solutions to solve their marketing or their digital or whatever their problems are. And then it starts to pay off in a completely different way. It's a whole new level that you never even thought about, because when people contemplate going into a more specialized position, usually what motivates that is saving time or making more money. It's not so much the altruistic, I want to have more impact on my clients. But the truth, the deep down truth is that we should be primarily motivated by that. And when you think about how or why an attorney or an engineer or a medical professional makes that decision, that is always a part of it for them. They just want to be effective on behalf of the clients they're serving, they're leading. And that should be true of our industry as well. And it's often missing, and that makes me sad. But this kind of crops up later, and it's an even deeper, more satisfying realization that all of a sudden we are really making a bigger difference on behalf of our clients. And it doesn't mean that we're doing more work for them. That's not how we're being more effective, because in fact, we'll sometimes be driven to do less work for clients, because as we look at the services we're offering them, we step back and in a moment of honesty, we say, you know what? We're not really that good at service 3 and 4. We're really good at 1, 2, and 5. We need to start referring our clients to somebody else who's better at that. And so this is the moment too, where you look across your firm and there's less focus on growing at all costs, and there's more focus on doing great work at all costs, which sometimes means that you stagnate in a healthy way your growth position. It's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's an honest reason why creative firms aren't necessarily driven by greater impact when they make the shift. Part of it is, I think one of the initial drivers for a broadly positioned firm is variety. Creative people crave variety.
Right.
So you resist narrowing your focus because you fear the boredom of narrowing your focus. But once you narrow your focus, you do indeed start to restrict the types of problems that you work on. And you benefit from pattern matching, as you like to say.
Right.
But then you taste what it's like. Often for the first time in your career, you taste what it's like to have this deep expertise. And once you taste that, you don't want to go back. You wouldn't trade it again for a variety. And I think this 1 year out is about the point where you realize you start to make money, because you get validation about 6 months on, or in the first 6 months. You start to do client work, you've underpriced it. But it's at about that year mark, you start to get feedback on how effective your work has been.
Right.
Clients start to share the success stories of the impact that your work has had. And then you have the realization, I really need to charge more. And I think that's about the point when you start to raise your prices.
Yeah, it's like this tighter spiral where you realize you're having more impact that gives you greater encouragement to charge more, and then you have even more impact because they listen to you more carefully and so on. But something else happens a couple years after that, and usually it seems like it's 3 to 4 years, and it's something you never would have predicted, and that's that you change your positioning again, and inevitably you will tighten it more. So when you first made the choice to land on this particular positioning, one of your chief worries was whether or not there would be enough opportunity for you. You did it, and there was plenty of opportunity, as you discovered, to your surprise. In fact, 3 years after that, you realize there's even more room to tighten this up. And so you and I have been in contact with one of the clients that we've worked with for many years. And it's interesting to see he went through 3 phases of tightening it up at 3 different junctures. And it's so interesting to see how that happens. The deeper you go, the more opportunity there is. And this is something that, again, surprises you. There's so many things along this journey that surprises you.
Yeah. And then 5 years on, what happens? So you're 5 years into your new positioning. Is it all rainbows and unicorns yet?
Yeah. Well, you think if you were going to be honest about a prediction, you would say, all right, how long can I possibly do this? Let's say I'm going to write an article every 2 weeks or every month. when am I going to run out of things to say? And you take this wild guess and say, all right, I think I could probably make this work for 3 years. And then you get to 5 years, a little bit to your surprise, and you look at the list of things that you'd like to explore writing an article about or something like that. And you realize, you know what? The longer I do this, the more there is to talk about. I will never run out of interesting things to write about, to develop a point of view and to stretch my readers' thinking. And then you say, why didn't I do this earlier again? Remind me, why didn't I do this earlier? And then you go to conferences and you're that annoying person that wants to give everybody advice about how they should do it right away and how easy it is because you've forgotten how hard it was.
Let me make a confession about my own business. We're recording this in February of 2020. I launched Win Without Pitching in April of 2002, so 18 years ago. And I thought, I'm going to do this new business development consultant thing for a couple of years. And I thought it'll only be a couple of years because it's going to take me 2 years to learn everything I need to know about the space. And then after that...
No arrogance there, right?
Well, it's arrogance, just stupidity, I think, because I thought after that, I'll be bored. I'll go do something else. And I was into it for about 6 months and it hit me that I will not live long enough to learn everything that I need to learn about what I do.
Right.
I've said this on other podcasts before. As a creative person, you shape this business that allows you to be a generalist because it appeals to your sense of variety. You get excited about solving the problem that you haven't previously solved. And then you've got these advisors like David and Blair standing over your shoulders and saying, you've got to pick a door and walk through it and never look back. And you imagine on the other side of that door is like your death from boredom. And then you open the door and you get in there and there's lots of metaphors, more doors, or it's like Narnia.
Yeah.
There's a universe on the other side of that door and you never know it. You never fully understand it until you actually walk through the door. You put your flag in the ground. You say, we're going to focus on this. Come on, everybody. Follow me. Even some of your people are going to look at it and go, I'm not going through that door. I'm going to die of boredom on the other side of that door.
It's a closet. It's not a room. It's not Narnia. It's a closet.
Yeah. But as we all know from reading Narnia, you go into the closet and it opens up into an entirely different world. All right. This has been great. Let's just summarize some key points about the transition. I'm thinking about Drury's question in particular and not knowing, the motivators behind it, but I'm thinking just accept that it's a lot of work in the early going. So there's all of the torture about taking the risk, about walking away from all of this stuff. It's a lot of work. You have to accept that there are staffing implications. What else do we want to hit on?
That it's not quite as bad as you think it might be in terms of how your current clients will react to this. It's okay to take some risks there, that you probably want to save a lot of money by hiring somebody to do this.
Yeah, to do the website in particular.
Yeah, right. To help you in any way you can. And there's firms that do this sort of work as well, that you may have to rewrite some case studies that you might need to think about whether you should create a sub-brand. And it's a lot of fun. Think about it as solving a creative problem like you might solve one for a client, and just view it as this great opportunity to stretch yourself and think about some new things.
Creative people want to solve the problem. I always say designers want to solve the problem and save the world, and you get enamored with solving your clients' problems. But this is the problem of your fundamental business model. And as a creative person, you should get to the point where you realize there's no problem that brings to you greater amounts of fun and satisfaction than solving this problem. This is the ultimate problem that is worth solving, that will be the most rewarding to you professionally.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thanks for this, David.
Thank you, Blair.
Thank you for listening to Two Bobs with David C. Baker and Blair Enns. Subscribe and learn more at twobobs.com. That's the number 2, BOBS.com.